Okay, I think. Oh, no, 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 no. Can I change that? Can I change that? Output. No, I can't. We'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. It'll happen. It'll happen. Um, and the YouTube chat we need to fix. That needs to pause. What do we got? Is that gonna work? Yes. Good. So that's working reasonably well. Then I gotta do this. There we go. So that's done. This should be changed around. The weird noise. All right. Hey, Spin to Win. I'm a little out of it tonight, I gotta admit. I knew I had the live stream, but I just was watching something else and lost track of time. Hello, Burning One. So we will be getting started here in a minute. Like I said, just trying to get everything going. I'm just a little behind tonight. Sometimes that happens. So I need to pull a few things, get a few things set up that I normally already have going. Oop. Oh, but I also need to fix that. Then I do that. Technology is amazing, but it also does things that you really don't want. What was I watching? I was actually watching Odd. It's a YouTube video of a guy playing NetHack, the classic game. And one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, I have time. Oh yeah, I have time. Oh yeah, I have no time. Guy named Matt Colville on YouTube. So I need to pull. Yeah, how to do certain times in anime. Exactly. So I need to pull in my review. We'll get that going. So on the oh, there we are. On one of the streams this week, I was talking about things going on with the site, and basically I'm getting paid soon. And so the question then becomes whether I should buy. So I can basically buy one of two things with my next paycheck. One is an upgrade to this camera, so basically a pro camera, or a more pro camera. The other is an upgrade to the CPU on this machine, which will allow me to do two cameras at once. High quality, none of these sort of slowdowns in the PC. And so I asked folks, and I'd like to know what you guys think. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have... Good. That will do, and then dramatic reading. And so I need the dramatic reading. also need to save that. Oh, that's right. So good. So I've got that ready to go. Almost ready to go. Okay. Oh, I need to do them. Got some formatting things to take care of for the dramatic reading. Interesting dramatic reading this week. So yeah, what do you guys think? Would you rather I have get the CPU first, or get the nicer camera first? Volume needs to be raised. My volume. Oh, sorry. Hey Kuma, I had the camera behind my laptop. Cool. Then let's see here. Okay, so that's in there. Then I just need to copy that to the teleprompter. So you guys get to see a little bit behind the scenes here as I get everything prepped up. Reading. So that audio should be better now. Oh, copy. Go to the reader. There's almost no news today. VIP only. Exactly. What was that? Dramatic reading. Put that in there. Oh. Paste. And this is normally stuff I do earlier on, but I just got a little behind. That will save. Good. Review. Edit. And review. Let's see here. Yeah. I will only use the nice new camera for my $50 and up Patreon patrons. That'll be the plan there. Right? Okay. I'm trying to remember if there's any real news. I mean, there are a few items I kind of wanted to cover. Yeah, novels. I guess it's interesting. Do maybe. No. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of funny. That's not really interesting. That's not really interesting. Okay. I think the news will be very simple this week, which is just the way of things. And we will be getting things going here in a minute. Good. Good, good, good. All right, let me grab some water, then we should be able to begin. Okay. There we go. I'm sure eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed some changes. Thank you, Kuma. So you got a little Totoro back there. I always point wrong direction. Been rearranging the the library here, and yeah, just getting things a little more anime-ish, I guess. Liking Telltale Batman, cool. Yeah, I haven't gotten into any of the Telltale games yet, but because there's so much other anime to watch, gosh, kind of crazy. All right, let's just go ahead, and I think I'm going to do the news old school style. So let me move this to a spot where I can do that. And I think we're just going to do the news nice and calm. Nice and simple and basic. To do that, gotta be the news. Gotta do the news stuff, right? Come on, time for the news. And welcome back to the anime news for the week ending. Whoa, that's wrong. That's wrong. That is not correct. Another thing I didn't do before this happening. There we go. There, that's better. Welcome to the latest anime news for the week ending March 30th, 2018. Going a little old school this week. Starting with a bit of news about the upcoming Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin 6th episode. This is an adaptation of the sort of original Gundam remake manga made into anime. The 6th episode is now being listed as the final episode. This is because there was a lot of confusion about whether there would be more after Gundam's 6th episode. The author of the manga said that there was going to be more coming, which implied that the 6th would not be the last one, but now that's still calling the last one. It will be the Loom arc, so it'll cover the Battle of Loom in Gundam The Origin. So looks like at least this OVA will close out with that 6th episode of Gundam The Origin. That'll open in Japan May 5th. So FYI, who knows where we're going to go from there. Speaking of final episodes, some weird news about Merchant Madchen and its final episodes, which are still kind of in limbo. They had to put it on hiatus for a while, and they've now announced that this week's 10th episode will be the final episode of the show, even though it's a 12-episode series. So they still don't know what they're going to do with episodes 11 and 12, because they've been working on them, but they've been working on them so long that now their time slot is up. You know, basically they burned through all 12 weeks of time trying to get that done, so they just, another show's going to come into that time slot in a couple of weeks. So, sorry folks, episode 10 is going to apparently very quickly finish things up, but then maybe we'll get episodes 11 and 12 like on DVD. Who knows? We'll find out. Maybe, hopefully. Who knows? A not-so-troubled anime franchise, really, is Dragon Ball, because Toei Animation has announced they're going to restructure their departments starting in April, and they already have two divisions right there. The television planning department and the video planning department, and now there was going to be reshuffled around, and they're going to add a third department, the Dragon Ball department. Yep. They're going to have one whole department just for Dragon Ball. That's how big that thing is. Moving over to a sort of an odd little story about Yokai Watch. Huge over in Japan. Certainly doesn't seem to be hitting it off over here in America. Manga Entertainment has tweeted that they are removing that indefinitely from their release schedule because they're having some licensing issues. So that's a little worrying that Yokai Watch may be going hitting the brakes over here in the West, because who knows, some licensing problems. Hopefully it doesn't cause a huge problem. Finally, a bit of sort of anime-related news. Mari Okada, the writer and now director behind Anohana, Mobile Suit Gundam Iron Blooded Orphans, Hanasaku Iroha, A Lull in the Sea, Anthem of the Heart, and Kizneiver, recently released an autobiography, and J Novel Club has announced they've licensed that novel. A free preview is already available on the J Novel website, and they'll release it as an ebook in early May, so only a few months from now. Okada was a shut-in early on in her life, and the book talks about her experiences with that, and then how she debuted as a screenwriter for direct-to-video back in the late 90s. So if that interests you, the original memoir only came out in April of last year. That will be coming out from J Novel shortly. So that's pretty darn cool, getting some behind the scenes about some major anime creators. So that's all the news really for this week. It's a pretty quiet week for anime news. And hope to see you all next week. Thanks for watching. Oh, free from PlayStation. Cool. I might grab that then. Yep. Burento-san. Hey, Rockman, Mega Man. Hey, Fisher. So, something weird happened. Last week, I did my big anniversary stream, and I did 3 giveaways, and only one of those things has been claimed. Now, I'm trying to remember... Stefan, Red2228, won one thing, and I got Stefan's address. And I'm trying to figure out with Stefan what the prize was. So I'm going to have to do another giveaway and give away more stuff because people aren't getting stuff, and it's kind of frustrating to me. So once I hear back, hopefully I will hear from Stefan tonight about which one those are. I didn't get a chance to go back and check. Thank you. Yeah, it's the wall scroll I've had for years and years. And now that I have... actually, what's behind it is my 3D printers, which used to be over here. Now they're back there. But they're underneath a thing. So one of the things I built this past weekend was a big plastic enclosure for the 3D printers, which is pretty darn ugly, but it helps them to print better. So when I do the live streams, I need to cover that with something. So I've got that wall scroll on there. I speak a chotto Nihongo. I can't speak tonight. My gosh. Time to slow down. Well, welcome to the stream, Rockman Mega Man 1. I'm honored to have a Japanese person on the stream, especially since I know that, you know, in Japan everybody watches anime all the time, right? And anime is I'm joking, you know, anime is this massive cultural artifact, and every week everyone sits down and watches, you know, Kill la Kill and Anohana and A Place Further in the Universe. That's just you know what everyone does in Japan. Watch anime all the time, and there are big statues for anime characters everywhere, right? It's just one big anime, you know, paradise, Japan. I wish. No, I've learned a handful of Japanese words, a few dozen practical words. You know, enough to be able to recognize a few things here and there in Japan, but I can't read it. I can pick out a few things here and there in the language, but I certainly can't sit down and watch an anime series and understand it. 1 second. Might be one more coming. It's funny, I knew somebody, so story time. I've tried to start a few anime clubs, and the most recent one attracted somebody who was who had very strong opinions and very strong beliefs about things. Just, you know, shall we say, extreme self-confidence, and said, "I've watched a lot of anime, and I watched so much anime. I've practically learned the language, and so I can pretty much understand what people are saying in anime. So the next time we were watching something, it was fan subbed, and there was an issue with the fan sub, and so I was like, oh, what are they saying? And the guy was like, something about a mother, I think. Not sure about this part, you know. It's like, you don't understand that much. Like, it's one thing to say, you know, oh, I picked up some Japanese from anime, but to say, I've learned Japanese from watching, you know, a few dozen anime series, it's like, not so sure. And I wasn't trying to test him. It was one of those things where, oh, cool, you know, here's a time when we need that. Could you please help? And So here's a question, Rockman Mega Man 1, and maybe you don't have enough exposure to know that. How has the general Japanese perspective on the otaku kind of stereotype changed? Is it still, are otaku seen any better or worse than, say, 10, 15 years ago? And we're talking about Japanese otaku. Is there still that kind of thing where they're probably sweaty people who live alone and fill their apartments with anime merchandise? Is it more is it more negative, less negative, about the same? Would you say? I wonder that. We tend to, over here in the West. We're only, or not only just, but it takes a long time for us to learn about how things actually are over in Japan. And when we learn things, I always wonder how outdated that information is. Yeah, well, NEETs are a little different because NEETs don't have to be otaku. NEETs can just be a person who's a shut-in. Whereas the otaku are the actual fans of like anime, manga, video games, and so forth. I also wonder, and this is something that nobody can really answer, just kind of what the popular perception is of fandom. Yeah, like how much is the breakdown is. How many of those fans are actually more video game fans or anime fans or manga fans. Fandom tends to lump a lot of different interests in, and sometimes that's more or less homogeneous, where a person is a fan of a bunch of different things, and it is a common thing. Over here, for example, we don't really have Star Trek fans who are Star Trek fans but don't like any other science fiction. You're a science fiction fan, and you like Star Trek and Star Wars and other things to various degrees. But it seems that otaku tend to get lumped a little bit more over in Japan. But again, that's one of those. I mean, that's going to depend on who you talk to and what media outlet is reporting on it. It's just way too complicated. But yeah, it's culture. I'm actually planning and preparing for a science fiction convention that's coming up in a couple of months in my area, and I'm working to do a couple of panels there. So it's kind of been on my mind a lot lately. This question of, as a fan of anime and such, I'm going to be going into an area where folks may not necessarily know much about anime, when I'll be kind of introducing them to anime and anime fandom, and trying to correct. I've been trying to think of what kind of, for lack of a better term, prejudices I will run into with that group, and kind of what answers I need to prepare about, why do they all look Caucasian? And all those sorts of weird questions you sometimes kind of get in, why do they have so many nude teenage girls? It's like, well, what's with the weird hair colors? Actually, I came across something really interesting about hair colors just this week. If you go back and you look at the color covers for like Ranma 1/2 and Urusei Yatsura and a lot of stuff of the 70s and 80s, the hair color changes from one cover to the next and from one color illustration to the next. So Ranma-chan will be red hair here and blue hair here and green hair here, because in the manga the hair color is black canonically. But when the mangaka are drawing color, color plates and color stuff, they like playing around with color. And so they would just kind of throw interesting hair color on there just for, visual interest. And so that became kind of a trope that you would put weird hair colors on the characters. But early on, the color of a character's hair in anime was not meant to be necessarily their actual hair color in universe. It was kind of an anime styling thing, which is weird. And misconceptions. That's a great way of putting it. Come on. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why for all the weird hair colors, it's just a visual style thing. It's not meant to be, anything, it's not meant to be realistic or not realistic. It's just a visual flair, basically. And actually, that's also often a thing with blonde hair. It's not meant to be literally blonde. It's just meant to be a different color, yellow or blue or red. Sometimes, obviously, it is. Hey, glad to hear that the word otaku has less negative connotations now than it used to be. That's good. Now the question is that change justified? Have otaku actually changed? Who knows? To answer your question, Benny Blanco, why all the new teenage girls? Part of it is because you have a culture, and that culture, where back in feudal Japan, most people did not have personal baths, but there were public bathhouses, and there was a strong tradition of cleanliness, which is not uncommon in multiple cultures, but it was certainly common there in feudal Japan. So lots of people went to bathhouses, and they were mixed gender. So you have a culture of frequent nudity, I'll put it that way. And then when Japan opened up to the West, the whole idea of mixed bathing was a little weird to the West, so it became gendered. You'd have a male side and a female side. But young kids could go in either side because they may come with their father or their mother, right? So even today, if you're up to around age 10, depending on the bathhouse, a kid can go in either side. Now, obviously, almost everybody has a shower or a bath at home now. But you still going to public baths and going to the bathhouses are a thing that many people do every so often. Maybe a couple times a year you'll go to a public bathhouse, and maybe every couple of years you'll go to an onsen, an actual vacation spot with hot springs. So you do get exposure to that, and you get exposure to naked kids, basically. And as a result, representations of nudity evolved very different culturally. So often in anime, nudity is used to represent innocence and pure-heartedness. So when a Magical Girl series has a magic transformation sequence, that show is typically aimed at 10-year-old girls. It's not meant to be titillating when she's shown with that glowy anime nudity. It is just there to show that she is still pure of heart, and that is what powers her magic or powers her or whatever. Now granted, there's lots of titillation. I just finished watching Gunbuster, and there's a lot of fan service in that, which I'll get to in a little bit. So it's not that it's always just about purity and innocence, but it's just a cultural difference. It is more possible to use nudity in a non-sexual sense in Japanese and Asian culture in general than it is over in the West. We just kind of equate that with naughtiness in popular media a little bit too more commonly. I am from America, East Coast of the U.S., United States. That is where I am from. It's where I born and raised. You know, I haven't moved within 50 miles of where I was born. So, yeah, I'm very much here. Not far from Washington, D.C. So, in that general sort of metropolitan area. You're right, Matt. And the other thing about hair color is, um, especially if you're an artist, you tend to have very similar eyes and mouths and nose and so forth. And because manga faces tend to have very minimal noses and mouths, um, it's difficult to differentiate between characters. But if you have weird hairstyles, this is also a big thing when video games came along, and you're trying to represent all your characters in these tiny little sprites with, you know, they're 12 pixels high. How do you do that except by having, you know, one with huge blue hair and one with small red hair and one with, you know, blonde hair with pigtails, big pigtails. So that fed into it as well. You know, you can't have just all dark brown hair girls. Otherwise, they all look the same when you're on a Sega Genesis system or an SNES. So that is definitely a thing. What anime is famous in the U.S. nowadays? Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Bleach. It depends on how you define famous. So, you know, I'd say most people in America have heard of Dragon Ball and would you know, if you showed them Dragon Ball, they'd say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that somewhere." Naruto and Bleach less so. I mean, I think, you know, the average homeowner doesn't really know what Bleach is, but that's the thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any anime that's famous in the sense that Americans sit down and watch it in the same way that they watch, you know, a reality TV show or the Keeping Up with the Kardashians or, you know, whatever pop TV there is. Much like in Japan, like, you know, you have shows like Doraemon and so forth, but it's not like everyone in Japan sits down and watches Anohana or whatever when it comes out. Yeah, we know about Bleach, the cleaning product, not so much that. But it's definitely changed a lot. I mean, people know what anime is. They're aware of these things, and when you show them something like Naruto or Bleach or Dragon Ball, it's like, oh, that's anime. Like they recognize that thing. Yeah, no, Fisher. I mean, if you go through, you will find a lot of pink-haired characters who are not European. And obviously, if you see American or British characters, they are often drawn with blonde hair. But there are plenty of blonde-haired characters who aren't necessarily, you know, coded as European. So it's not a one-to-one match. Is Little Nemo and Slumberland considered anime? That's a really interesting question. In that I classify it as kind of borderline anime. It was sort of a co-production between Western and Japanese companies, and a lot of Japanese luminaries worked on it, but also a lot of Western people worked on it. So it's kind of both mashed together, right? And you can certainly see anime influence in it. You can also see a lot of Western influence in it. So it's a hybrid, really, is Little Nemo. Fascinating, very troubled production in the movie. And I think it's out there like on YouTube and such. You can track down Little Nemo. For those who aren't familiar, Little Nemo and Slumberland is a late 80s, early 90s animated film that just attracted everybody to work on it. Miyazaki worked on it, Takahata worked on it, but also like Ray Bradbury worked on it. I think Harlan Ellison worked on it. All sorts of different people. Some Disney animators were involved. Just, you know, all sorts of people on both sides of the Atlantic were just really interested in this animated project. Because Little Nemo and Slumberland was originally a comic strip, a famous comic strip in the West in the 20s and 30s, I think. And this was the kind of the big budget adaptation of that story. And it just attracted all this attention and got this huge, ridiculous budget, and it came out and just tanked. Just bad timing. But it's a beautifully animated film. Like I said, Miyazaki involved, so forth and so on. Yeah, exactly. Tonto Duende. Funny. That's a cool name. Yeah, the colors do not have an in-depth meaning. I mean, you will certainly have shows in which the director will sit back and say, you know, red hair often signifies a fiery personality, so I'll give this character red hair. But there's no, you know, cohesive industry-wide red hair means this, blue hair means that. Oh, I do not disagree that I do not agree that 90s anime were better than present time anime. I think it's pretty even, to be honest. I think there's plenty of terrible stuff in the 90s, and there's some great stuff in the 90s. But we're getting some interesting stuff this you know, over the past few years. I think, you know, there's that whole weird nostalgia thing where we remember all the amazing stuff from our youth and from that time, but we don't remember all of the stuff we had to sift through. It just kind of falls out of your mind. So, obscure stuff from the previous year or this year even. How obscure do you want to go? Did you try... What was that thing from 2 seasons ago? The magical girl fighting aliens in the clothing district. Gosh, it's gonna annoy me. I think I have a text thing about that. Miscellaneous. I do. Let's see here. No, this was this season. Where are my notes from previous seasons? Huh. That's interesting. I don't appear to have notes from previous seasons. Odd. Meanwhile, though, need to save this. Let me get this sorted. One moment. Please stand by. Stand by. Ion control. Fire. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right, Liquidus, that most folks remember Little Nemo from the NES game. Which is sad because, again, it was a hugely popular comic strip in the 20s and 30s. Like, you know, that was the Calvin and Hobbes of its day. Everyone knew about Little Nemo back in during its heyday. And that's all forgotten now. You know, you go up to the average person and you talk about Little Nemo in Slumberland, they will, huh? They will have no idea what you're talking about. The average person on the street, no clue. That sounds like a rock. Sad as it is. Pixar Disney thing. Pixar did not exist when Little Nemo was made. You may be thinking of a different movie. Or are we talking about a different? Are we talking about something else now? Because Pixar was not around when Little Nemo was made. Little Nemo was well before Pixar. And Disney was only tangentially involved. Like employees from Disney were interested in kind of working on it from the side, but yeah, I don't think I know anybody who has heard of Little Nemo the movie. Obviously that'll differ a little bit in different parts of the country and the world, but and I mean, you go on IMDb and it certainly does not have massive numbers of reviews and upvotes. All right. I need to pull this up so I can do this thing. I think I'll do the review next. Yeah, you asked it, absolutely. Yeah, Yuasa's definitely sort of found his niche, if you will. Shoot. Shoot. 1 second. I have a problem with the text here. Stand by. Annoying. Thought I fixed this. Oh, okay. Excuse me. I'll get here. The dramatic reading text has a whole bunch of weird carriage returns that I don't want. And I have to manually remove them, which I thought I already did, but apparently I didn't. So we just need a moment to get that taken care of. Okay. Cool. Now we can pull that. And now we can actually do the thing we want to do. Which would be nice. But then we have to fix. I guess this is why I. Oh boy, this is gonna take forever. One moment. Actually, since, gosh, go on US. Okay. Doop. Doop, doop, doop. We'll be there in just a minute, folks. Hold on. Just a second. Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. Stay on target. Stay on target. Do not reveal people's full names, because otherwise that's just not cool, to be honest. Okay. Cool. Now we can do that. Oh, Finding Nemo. Yes. Yeah. Very different movies. Very different movies. Yeah, that people definitely remember Finding Nemo. Yeah, that's yeah. That explains it. So yeah, Little Nemo in Slumberland was a famous comic. Do I have? No, I was looking to get one of those, and it was insanely expensive. Who did Little Nemo in Slumberland? I don't know. Again, big guy in the 20s and 30s, and Winsor McCay. That's what it was. Who was also a big luminary in early animation. He basically invented hand-drawn animation. Winsor McCay did. And so, in the 80s, there was an adaptation of Little Nemo in Slumberland as an animated film, hand-drawn animated film, which again attracted all sorts of luminaries. Died on the vine. Well, didn't die on the vine, but died in theaters. Finding Nemo, very different. Well, I watched Ready Player One. Maybe. I'm. Pardon the adult language, but I like the 80s, as somebody pointed out. I like the 80s, but I don't really want to masturbate to it. Ready Player One feels like it is just wallowing in the 80s and 80s references to an extent that I don't know that I will enjoy. There's just a lot of, I don't know. I think it's just going to be, reference, and obviously there'll be a plot in there, but the plot just looks kind of generic. So we'll see. I mean, it might be a fun ride, but I don't know that I really want to plunk down, $17 to go see it in the theater. We'll see. Maybe. I think it's one of those movies where I'm going to wait for some reviews, just to get a sense of what the plot is, just how much it is. Aren't the '80s awesome? That kind of thing. So we'll see. Difference between anime and Western animations. There's a lot of differences, but it really just comes down to approaches to animation. What the tropes are, when you pause, when you don't pause, lip flaps, all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nostalgia is huge right now, and unfortunately, the movie industry is in a place where there's no middle ground. So you have to be, high budget or no budget at all. And because nostalgia sells, folks are doubling down on nostalgia. Which is why you get stuff like Jurassic World, and even the Marvel movies to an extent. Well, I mean, in fairness, Spin, there's not a lot of great stuff. There wasn't a lot of great stuff coming out before the nostalgia. It's not like Hollywood was making amazingly classic, mind-blowing films month after month before the nostalgia wave happened. People like nostalgia. People like thinking back. So, I agree with you in general that I would love to see more original stories being made. But I think the reaction, I think the preference for nostalgia, Hollywood isn't necessarily sacrificing a lot, unfortunately. And it's a confluence of things. You're right. It's the return of Star Wars. It's the success of the Star Trek movies, which are successful for lots of reasons beyond nostalgia. But people tend to latch on to, oh, this is an old thing that we can make new again. Yeah. I certainly like to see people make their own new thing. But who knows? And it may be one of those things where, kind of like back in the day with Westerns, where, you kind of had to start with Westerns and then move on to something else. You kind of had to prove yourself with this formula that everyone was just making and churning out. That might just be what nostalgia is. We have to start making a nostalgic film, and then that gives you the street cred to make your original thing. Who knows? My thoughts on the limited set of Legend of Galactic Heroes. I think it's fine. Absolutely we should be trying out what is obviously a successful formula in Japan, which is expensive limited edition box sets. Especially when, that's not going to be the only version of Legend of the Galactic Heroes that will ever be released in the West, right? It's like, limited edition, good. If you can afford it, go for it. If not, fine. Right? That's how it's supposed to work. Yeah. I don't have a strong attachment to Western films either. Oh, and by the way, when I say Westerns, I mean like Westerns like Wild West horses, in case that wasn't clear. Yeah, like most people, I think, an extremely well-structured Western, I'm all for. And I should switch this over. It's not news anymore. A well-structured Western, I'll love that. I'll enjoy that. But in terms of, here's a Western, But that's true of most things. Here's a romance movie, here's a comedy, Yeah. And in fairness, I think Hollywood has never been an original. Hollywood has never been an original medium, a strongly original medium. They've been adapting stage plays and books for a long time. Lest we forget, The Godfather and Jaws were based on books, right? I love Shanghai Noon, and Shanghai Nights was fun too. Those two things. Not the greatest Russians of all time though. I'm all for Jackie Chan movies. I love Jackie Chan. I need to see his Jackie Chan's most recent film. I'm very interested about that. Oh, man, I do. I cannot get Ocean Waves. That film was impenetrable to me. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that is the big problem with the nostalgia wave is that it makes it a lot harder to tell an original story. In confluence with this, big budget or tiny budget thing, you can't make another Star Wars, like Episode 4, 1977 Star Wars. That's just that. There is no budget to make something at that scale that is not based on original property anymore. That might change, but I'm saying right now. And that's the sad thing, is it's just hard for those original voices to get a voice. Yeah, and occasionally you get an Arrival or something else that succeeds, but in general, it's very hard. Now, granted, that's partly because things have changed. Like those things are now being done on Netflix. If you, what is the recent orc movie? Was it Hitch? The Will Smith orc movie on Netflix. That's I think a great example of where, okay, you go to Netflix and make your weird original thing, and there you go. You're not going to get it made at Paramount or what have you. Because that ship has sailed. Alrighty. Now, I'm not saying remake Star Wars. I'm saying nobody can, just as George Lucas created his own original universe in Star Wars, nobody can do that now. Nobody can make their original space opera universe film. Who can do that? Wow, Japan Times is talking about a third anime boom. Yeah, that is certainly summarized by, or that is certainly supported by the number of anime being made and Netflix's support of the medium. Wonder what that'll do to the anime studios. All the pressure on the studios. Well, yeah, but I mean, there are always book-based movies. How Green Was My Valley, yeah. A lot of the great films of the 40s and 50s. Oh gosh. The Humphrey Bogart movie. The detective one. My brain is gone tonight. The Maltese Falcon. Based on a book. So, in other words, I think it's one of those things where we're certainly in a time when these things are more common, but I think a lot of journalists are making it up to sound like this is a completely new phenomenon, or that it's massively different than it was, 10, 20, 50, 80 years ago. Now, Casablanca was original. That wasn't based on it was a Humphrey Bogart movie, but it was an original storyline. I think it might have been, very, very loosely based on some thing. Thanks, Kuma. Yeah. No, Maltese Falcon is what I'm thinking of. Sam Spade book. But, yeah, it's, yeah. And I mean, we're anime fans. There's very little originality in this medium. I have not seen Whiplash. I do not even know what Whiplash is. I haven't heard of it before, as far as I'm aware. All right, let's take a quick break, as I prepare for. Oh, cool. We can finish this up. As I prepare for this thing. Yeah, that's weird. That they're going back and doing like the pterodactyl chase scene in the original novel. So, when Jurassic Park came out, I went back and read the novel after I saw the movie, I think, and so I remember reading those scenes and saying, "Oh, that was a good scene." I understand why they had to cut it for time, but yeah. All right, so we'll be back in just a minute. We'd all love to visit Japan, Rockman. Believe me, it's the getting there is the problem. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes. In the meantime, we can finish up that Superman cartoon from last week.
Lane, this way, please. How does it feel to be home? Smile, please. How about Clark Kent? Did he get away?
No. No, he's still over there. But don't worry. Superman promised to look after him.
That was quick. Weirdly quick. Sorry about that. That's sorry. Must have been some sort of video quality or video problem with that video. Strange. But yeah, a ticket to Japan for folks like us is like $2,000 round trip, or like 200,000 yen. So unfortunately, not a thing we can do often. Plus hotels and so forth. All right, and I forgot to do the thing. So 1 second. Now let's see what else we can do. Ooh, a panel clip. Let's do history of anime. How long is this? Let's see if this works correctly. That's a freaking long clip. Oops. So let's do a little bit of history of anime panel. And so we got Macross, which became part of Robotech. I'm laughing because one of the big things about Macross is that it had this ridiculously high animation budget, about twice the budget of an average anime series at the time. So the action animation is beautiful, and I have to pull the one screenshot where all the faces are wobbling. It's just what's going on with it? Anyway, so yeah, Macross had a very high animation budget, and part of this was trying to put to rest this idea, because the problem they had is that, again, budgets were always low for animation. No one was willing to put the money into it. They managed to scrounge together money and put it towards animation and show that Japanese animators were capable of high-quality action animation. And Macross was very much intentionally pushing forward animation quality, pushing forward the dynamism of that camera. By the way, Tezuka, his father, owned a film camera and a film projector. So he was watching all of those Western films, other people worked. That's how he was able to make more ballistic, these more dynamic stories. And so they were saying, let's do that. Let's do for anime what Tezuka was doing for manga, essentially. Not consciously, but that was kind of their goal here. It also had this, Among the Stars. One of the ideas of Macross was, let's introduce an actual story about romance and relationships into a manga series. Now, Gundam had done this to an extent before. There are some storylines involving that, but it's absolutely not the focus. Macross makes it much more foregrounded.
There's a love triangle.
Love triangle with her cousin. Anyway, it's complicated. The thing about Macross is that, oddly enough, making it attractive to the other half of the human population makes money. So yes, it's got a huge audience back in the day, of both boys and girls. And they also discovered, hey, boys don't automatically turn off the television as soon as two characters kiss, and girls can watch action animation. Who'd have thunk? So yes, this was huge. People call it like the Avatar of its day. This was just, everyone watched it, everyone knew what this was, because it looked so good, and because it told these stories. They got into Robotech. Along came Creamy Mommy, another magical girl series, important because they made the toys first. Creamy Mommy was designed around the idea of merchandising. And I don't mean that in a completely negative way. I mean that they said, look, we're going to merchandise this. We know we're going to merchandise. Every anime series gets merchandised. Let's think about this ahead of time and design everything around it so that everyone will make money so we can make more of it, right? So Creamy Mommy introduced the idea of the media mix, which is this idea that you're going to have a large amount of material surrounding the work, and if all of those different kinds of material can kind of stand on its own. Contrast Attack on Titan, say, with Star Wars. In Star Wars, the movies are the centerpiece of that franchise. Attack on Titan, which is more important, the anime or the manga? Depends. It depends on who you ask, and it depends on who you're talking to. Because while the manga is driving it, they are absolutely fine with you getting into Attack on Titan through the anime and not through the manga. And there's much more willingness for the franchise, for a franchise in Japan, to allow different portions of it to kind of live on its own. And that also allows it to grow its own part of that media mix, and to have its own merchandise and so on and so on. Yes. So anime was changing a lot during this period. And because a lot of money was coming into the industry from the West, a lot of the 80s cartoons that aired in the West were actually animated in Japan. Because they had the animation studios do it. G.I. Joe. Okay, I'm going to interrupt myself there so we can do the dramatic reading. Where did I put the... There it is. I wish I could dig through to get to Japan. That'd be cool. All right, let's see if we can make this work. We will see. Let's do dramatic reading. Fun one. Weird one. So this is a dramatic reading of an anime post from 20 years ago about the... dang it. Sorry. The thing switched over and I couldn't find it. Start over again. Oh. And then the app restarts, of course. This is a dramatic reading of an anime post from 20 years ago about the Ghost in the Shell audio and what it should be from Jeffrey, who writes the following. Well, the whole reason I am not purchasing Ghost in the Shell on DVD is the lack of AC3 soundtrack in the Japanese language version. I have watched Ghost in the Shell in both its dub and sub formats, and I don't want to have to ever sit through the dub again, smiley face. Also, once you hear the difference between AC3 and Dolby Pro Logic on a good sound setup, anything less than AC3 is unacceptable in my humble opinion. Sure, I will watch something in Dolby Pro Logic, but I won't buy it. Especially since an AC3 soundtrack is supposedly one advantage of owning anime on DVD versus videotape or laserdisc. I think Tenchimoyo movies are the only US released AC3 laserdiscs. If companies want people to purchase DVDs of anime already released on video and laserdisc, they need a good incentive like AC3 soundtracks for both the English and Japanese language versions. A large portion of the DVD market also own laserdisc players and may already have a lot of anime on laserdisc. A nifty looking menu and text info isn't enough. Reply from Luigi shortly thereafter. Manga Entertainment posted in Rec Art's anime fandom about 2 weeks ago that the reason for no AC3 on the Ghost in the Shell DVD in Japanese is because that there is no AC3 Japanese track. How can you expect a company to give you something that doesn't exist? So yeah, beware of complaining about things that aren't actually things. And that's the thing, Fisher. Thanks, Rockman, for coming by. Glad you could be here. Have a nice weekend. We'll be back next week. Hope you can join us next week again. Always appreciate having the Japanese view. So yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, I was not expecting that particular twist. Like, I figured folks would say, oh, it's not so bad. Oh, you know, there are reasons, but not like, there is no AC3 version in Japanese. That was funny. All right, let's move on to the review. And as usual, I will layer in video later on. So you'll see actually clips of this when I post it to YouTube. I just can't do that, and manage all that while I'm doing the review. All right, so that's ready to go. Let's just move right into the... Actually, let me take a drink. My allergies are starting to act up with the spring season. So I'm starting to get that, full up nasal thing. And I got to make sure that my throat's ready to go for a review, so I don't, in the middle of it, go... Anyway. And that's not so good. And of course, it doesn't help that I've been talking for the past hour, which tends to get the things moving. All right, let's talk about Gunbuster. Here we go. Many years ago, a group of anime fans got together to organize conventions and make their own fan merchandise. The group grew, adding animators to their number, and produced several fan anime films. Those were so popular, they got the budget to make an animated feature film, Royal Space Force: The Wings of Honeymise. While not a commercial success, it brought a lot of critical praise for the thoroughness of its world building and its artistic sense. Their next project synthesized those two experiments into a 6-episode OVA, Aim for the Top, Gunbuster. And that's what I'll be talking about in this review here. If you watch the first episode of Gunbuster, you'll be forgiven for thinking it's just a parody. On the surface, it has all the trappings of a classic girls' sports anime. Fit high school girls, melodrama about who's getting teamed up with whom, an airheaded protagonist bullied by a clique, or clique, however you pronounce that, and a bouncing, upbeat opening theme about making yourself better. Except this is made by anime fans, so they're all training to pilot giant robots. Now that first episode is a pitch-perfect parody. So much that you're not always exactly sure what's a joke. It feels exactly like a sports anime, but the visuals of mecha doing push-ups really ramp up the comedic effect. It's a little weird. Then we get to episode 2. The parody disappears, most of the humor fades away, and Gunbuster blossoms into a science fiction drama. The alien menace that's referenced briefly in the opening minutes of the first episode suddenly comes front and center as the characters deal with the trauma of fighting in a war, they lose some comrades, and they start to face their own imminent mortality. Yeah. The animation quality, meanwhile, varies. While the characters remain mostly on model, and there are plenty of quiet moments without any movement, as is very typical of anime-style animation, most of the action sequences feature plenty of smoothly animated movement. It's exactly what you'd expect of skilled fans executing on their favorite ideas. They love this stuff. They pour attention into many things, but know when to back off. The direction, too, is not afraid of unusual camera angles, but remains remarkably lucid all the way throughout. If anything, though, that gets to one of Gunbuster's biggest drawbacks. While Honeymise felt like Gainax's one big shot at a memorable work of art, Gunbuster feels like all their favorite things from anime all mixed into one show. Cute schoolgirls, mecha, space combat, grizzled space captains, weird aliens, massive megastructures, and random fan service. More on that in a second. While the staff does skillfully blend those elements into a very comprehensible plot, the series does feel schizophrenic at times because there's just so much in there. Now let me talk about that fan service for a moment. The first episode introduces the famous or infamous Gynax bounce, in which the artists lovingly animate the bouncing of a girl's breasts as she moves. However, other than a brief locker room scene of girls in their underwear, there's no further fan service until episode 2, which features a lengthy bathhouse scene with 3 girls whom we see from practically every angle. The rest of the series kind of follows suit in both ways. Long stretches with no significant fan service, then suddenly large swaths of nudity or scantily clad girls. It can be a bit jarring. Overall, for a staff with only one full-length feature film under their belt, they do a remarkably successful job at pacing, both in terms of editing shots and sequences and the overall story. They hold on shots where necessary so the viewer can process new information, while the action sequences can move at a breakneck speed. Impressive, although still a little rough around the edges. Even better, the characters in the show do grow over time. The protagonist in particular grows as a person, but slowly. She earns her character growth without feeling whiny or annoying during the episodes that lead up to that. I was very impressed with how well they managed that, and she's not the only one. Speaking of the characters, props to the voice actors who, even in a short OVA like this, deliver strong emotional performances. Some of the minor characters are rather blandly performed, particularly random bridge characters, but most of the primary cast sound spot on for their emotional deliveries. As the show progresses, it leans more heavily on its mecha roots. And here's where it gets hard to recommend or even, in a sense, appreciate Gunbuster. Without getting into spoilers, what starts as a sports parody and turns into a Gundam-style serious mecha war story grows decidedly super robot in the final episodes. We're back to that weakness of a show made by fans by combining all their loves into one story. The titular giant robot feels like it was pulled straight out of a cheesy 70s giant robot show, complete with shouted attack phrases and martial arts moves. It never feels wrong, but it does contribute to a slightly unmoored feeling, where you can't quite pigeonhole the series and figure out what it's trying to do. And sometimes that's a virtue, but in this sense, it feels odd. For example, time dilation resulting from near faster than light travel is a major plot point, and the final episode is almost entirely in black and white. A lot of different things happening in this OVA. Weird. Ultimately, though, Gunbuster is a love letter to anime, but at a much more fundamental level than your typical fan creation. Gunbuster isn't just copying anime tropes. Its fans love anime for what it tries to do, for its deeper themes and emotional weight and attractive, cool characters that the viewers grow to admire. These people are not just copying anime, they are trying to make a great work of anime. And for that, they should certainly be commended. Ultimately, Gunbuster partly works based on how familiar you are with anime tropes, how much you can laugh along with some of these elements, but also how much you can appreciate fans shooting for the moon. That is ultimately what Gunbuster is, and it's an impressive achievement on that alone. All right. Hey, Blue Dragon. Hey, Daniel. That's the Gunbuster review. Now, I have a little something to share about Gunbuster. And I'll be happy to take questions from you all. This is the original Gunbuster OVA, not the remake or the sequel. So when I was watching it, I got to the final episode, and it's all in black and white. And I thought, is something wrong with my visual setup? Hey, Derp. Good to see you. So I went online to check to see, is this last episode supposed to be in black and white? And I came across a forum thread about it. And it was hilarious, because the question was basically, why is the last episode of black and white? And there were several people in there who were absolutely firmly convinced that this was purely an artistic decision by Gainax. It was not a cost-cutting measure. That that's just art. It was art. It's all it was, people. Very clearly. Here's the thing. And their argument was that, or one of the people's arguments was that it was still painted, right? They still had to paint them all. So that meant they were still using all the same equipment. It couldn't have been any cheaper to do it black and white, because you still have to paint in different shades. So they didn't save any money. And the answer to that is, well, while yes, you still have to use those things, it still makes a lot of color choices a lot simpler, right? It is still a lot less time consuming to choose your colors and make all those things consistent and so forth. Also, the aliens are very wildly colored with a lot of different colors on one ship. And in the last episode, that you don't see any of that. They're just sort of a mottled color. Not to mention the fact that one of the really big action scenes involves fast panning across the storyboard images. There's no actual movement animation. It's just, zip, 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 explosion, explode. It's just still images that they're zipping back and forth on. But no, Gainax does no wrong. When they do something different, it is purely an artistic choice. It is not for, any budgetary reason. Yeah. Oh, and the last couple of shots are full color. So I think they realized they had a budgetary problem, and they decided to go that route, partly because it would afford them artistic advantages. It wasn't purely cost-cutting, but I am not convinced that, cost was not a factor at all. And then, because the whole Gainax can do no wrong thing, really, that annoys me about fandom. I do not get that at all. Sorry, folks. Gainax is an amazing, amazing studio. They've done amazing things, but they are not infallible. Weird. And it's also partly that whole, I love this thing, and thus I must protect it. I must defend it from all comers, and insist that it is amazing. It's like, well, we don't all have to agree with that. The other thing that I probably should mention in the review, oh my gosh, are so many things from Evangelion pulled from Gunbuster. Visuals, visual tropes, that's straight from Gunbuster. A lot of different stuff. Yeah. Well, to that point, Spindwin, I think the issue was probably that they were, in a sense, time is money. So it's one of those things where they probably were, they weren't managing the amount of time and budget they had. So it's like, well, we could, spend another 6 months on this, but we can't actually afford to keep people employed for that long. So we've got to speed it up. We've got to do it faster. Right. So it is still the same number of steps, if you will. And it still costs money, but it allows you to compress that schedule to get it done while people are still on payroll. You can still afford to pay them, while you're trying to get the money in. Yeah, there's a lot of Gunbuster in Evangelion. In fact, I would now say that if you want to fully understand Evangelion, you need to have watched Original Gundam, Space Runaway Ideon, and Gunbuster. I think those are the three keys, if you will, to Evangelion, of getting, kind of where they were coming from in terms of tone, style, scale, stuff like that. I think really. So yeah, it really, and also just a lot of that, people standing around, somebody in the foreground like this and somebody in the background, like this, talking back and forth, that kind of thing. Very Gunbuster. Bridge bunnies, all that stuff. Very, very, very Gunbuster. But man, that shows. I mean, yeah, it's a weird OVA, and it's definitely not for everyone. So I can understand folks like you, Matt, who only watched 2 episodes. I get it. I totally understand. I enjoyed it, but it is one of those things. What's the figure on the box next to the green ball on the bookshelf? So the green ball on the bookshelf is a Haro from Gundam. And with this thing, this white box, this thing here, this would be, that's a Gunpla. That is a model kit, a Gundam model kit right there. A gift, a Christmas gift. So yeah, that's what that is. It's from Gundam Seed Astray, which was a manga, I think, originally spin-off of Gundam Seed, and they did I think they did like an ONA or OVA short of Astray, if I recall correctly. Yep, that is a Seed Astray model. Yeah, that is a like $200 model kit right there. Perfect grade. Yeah. Yeah, that was a very humbling Christmas gift. Gosh. So that'll take a few hours to assemble. 1 or 2. But I have a few other model kits to get through first. I'll do a couple of... I have 3, I think, still to do. And they're all, the 144 scale. And then I'll start on that guy, and that'll take, 6 months. Gosh. Assembling every single joint of each finger, and all the different bits, and all the... Jeez. That's going to be interesting. I mean, it'll probably be... It's 3 feet tall. Nah, it's not that big, but it'll be big. It'll be a big one. And I by the way, I believe that that does literally... You do assemble literally every joint of every finger on those. Like, it's that crazy. But yeah, it's... I'll be interested to see where that goes. So I might end up doing like a special kit bash on that one, and do like some longer episodes for that. Like spend all day Saturday working on that, and I mean it will take me probably multiple days to assemble a kit that scale, that size. I'm glad I'm doing it now after I've assembled a dozen or so of these. Well, maybe 8 or 9 of these things now, because I won't be quite as mind blown trying to assemble every single little piece. They dubbed the Gundam Seed ONA. That's a good question, David. That's a very good question. That was, gosh. Why can't I remember the name of that? Gundam Seed Stargazer. Stargazer. That's the ONA. They might. I mean, with Right Stuff releasing all these things, but they might not. I mean, it may be one of those stuff. Is there any merchandise like Haro or the like that were especially difficult to get a hold of? Not particularly, because frankly, I'm not one of these people who digs into merchandise and like hunts it down. I'm not like, I absolutely have to buy this thing, so I will spend the next 3 months trying to find it. So there probably is that stuff. I just don't care that much, frankly. If I happen to see it at a convention or online, I might pick it up, but I also just kind of don't do too much. Sonic Mania Adventures, cool. Nice, releasing it on YouTube. That's smart of them. I have Sonic Mania on the Switch over there, which is a very, very good 90s Sonic game. I would love to be a fly on the wall at Sega when they are looking at like the numbers around Sonic the Hedgehog, the character. Like, on the one hand, they keep trying to keep this character in the zeitgeist, but it is a character that has not managed to make the transition into, modern video games very well. And it just seems like a character that, like, kind of like Banjo-Kazooie or whatever, where you just kind of let it go, kind of acknowledge this is a big thing, and then you just kind of you sunset that character to an extent. But something must be making money, and obviously Sonic Mania was a big shot in the arm. But it seems so strange they just keep pushing this character over and over. So I wonder where that money's coming from. Like, are Sonic, toys a perennial bestseller? What part of the Sonic universe is just keeping all that afloat? Because it doesn't seem to be the video games. Sonic Mania accepted. Yeah, lots of folks love Sonic. And you'd think, like if I were them, I would say, okay, we're going to do a Sonic anime every 3 years. We're going to do Sonic stuff, but we're just going to stop pushing the video games. Because the video games just haven't worked out. Well, maybe we'll do a Sonic video game every few years. Every 5 years we'll do we'll try a Sonic game, but we're not going to push it. It'll be a side-scrolling platformer or whatever. But it just seems like something they just should not be pushing in the video game arena. But again, I don't know the numbers. Who knows how all that fits together and fills. Shokugeki no Brent. Yeah, the fan base. But that's the thing. How is the fan base like? The fan base must be buying something for them to continue to pour money into the character, and it's certainly not the video games. So where is all that money flowing? Yeah, exactly, Derp. I bought a few things, and of course now that I'm minimizing more and more, that's another thing you may have noticed. So a few months ago I mentioned I'm trying to live an increasingly minimalist life, and folks said that and said, and I'm looking at bookshelf after bookshelf of books, which is true, but there used to be 2 bookshelves behind me, and those are now gone. So I'm slowly but surely kind of working out. I won't get rid of every book, but I'm minimizing. That could be Sonic pulls the money from the future, or from another dimension, maybe. Maybe Sonic just has money in a weird animal-based anthro dimension. It's an international character. So it could also be Europe. Maybe Sonic merchandise is bigger in Europe. There's obviously some Sonic merchandise for sale over here, but I certainly don't see a lot of Sonic stuff flying off the shelves in America. But I don't live in California. Who knows? But yeah, it's weird. And hey, emeralds. True, emeralds are they make money. Licenses, that's possible too. That would make sense. Boy, it'll be fun to see what ends up in Smash Brothers. What characters go in there? Because now there are so many opportunities for characters in Smash Brothers. Well, it's funny, Fisher. I went through a period some years ago where I purged some books, things that I hadn't read in forever and just didn't really care about. And there was one manga series. It was a 3-volume series by the guy who did Battle Angel Alita. And I thought when I got into it, there was going to be a long-running series, and it was only 3 volumes long. So it had this big shonen setup. I was really enjoying it. And then it got to volume 3, and it ended. And I was kind of disappointed. So I ended up, I think I gave it to my local library or something like that. So other folks could enjoy it. And later on, I was thinking about something, and I was like, oh, I wish I could read that again. And I kind of regretted getting rid of it. And then I thought, well, I can just go on Amazon and rebuy them, like they're on Amazon. And I never did. And every time I thought about that series again, and thought, oh yeah, I did regret getting rid of those books, I always thought about going on Amazon, and I have yet to ever repurchase those books. So it's like, how much did I ever really regret getting rid of them when I could buy them again for, $15, probably all 3 of them? Any good mystery books you recommend? Agatha Christie. Just go back and work your way through all the Agatha Christie stuff. If you like medieval stuff, the Brother Cadfael series, I liked a lot. There are a lot of them, and it's quite realistic medieval historical books. Although, I mean, they're fiction, but the research into medieval life is pretty accurate, and so that works. But yeah, I would say Agatha Christie. I love Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle. You just have to appreciate that Sherlock Holmes comes from a very particular point in history, and it was very early in the evolution of the mystery as a genre. So the character is not what you expect from a typical detective character. See here. So yeah, I would say Agatha Christie, Brother Cadfael. Have I watched any Mario Okada's works? I think so. Let me just... Have I? Yes, Hanasaku Iroha, not all the way through, like the first half of it, which I really enjoyed. And the first few episodes of Iron-Blooded Orphans I have seen. And again, was really impressed, but I was... So, Iron-Blooded Orphans, Evan and I were trying to watch together, but we could never schedule a time for us to get together to watch it. We didn't want to get ahead of either of us. So, we just kind of one of those theories where, oh, we got to go back to that someday, and it never happened. So one of these days I'll go back. And I saw the first episode of Anohana, but it just didn't really, that series just didn't really work for me as of that first episode. But yeah, so I have started purging. I purge a lot of nonfiction stuff that I read when I was in my teen years. That was maybe psychology books where I'm like, this is nice, but I've learned this now. Like this doesn't help me anymore. That kind of stuff, and then some business books, things like that, where I'm like, I've outgrown this now. I don't need to go back to this. And like I went through an American comic collection phase where I was like, ooh, people were recommending this, and I bought it, and now I'm like, I don't really like this. So there's some comic stuff I can purge. Same thing with sci-fi and fantasy, where there's a lot of stuff that, and yeah, like Spin, I don't really reread stuff. I've come to realize there's too much stuff out there I haven't read yet, and I would rather read that stuff than reread something I've already read. So I'm probably, I don't need that much stuff anymore. Now manga's a little different, because manga, so I can get rid of my copy of Starship Troopers, for example. Because while I love that book, if I ever want to reread it, that is going to be at the library, and it's going to be on Amazon forever. Right? There's a lot of those classic works that I can reacquire if I need to. And I probably won't. Like I read that, interesting, but don't really feel a strong need to go back to it. But like manga, there are a lot of manga volumes that it is hard to get now. And that remain out of print for long periods of time. So I'm not like jumping to get rid of manga. I think manga is one of those things I'm going to have a hard time getting rid of. If I had some friends here, and we could sort of have a collaborative manga library, I might be into that. Yeah. Yeah, Maria Okada is absolutely on a roll. She is one of the rising stars of anime, which is awesome. We need that. And she's certainly telling stories that people care about. Like, that's absolutely cool, and she's now a director. Like, that's awesome. And unfortunately, we're now hitting that point with Mari Okada where now, like, everything she makes has to be a masterpiece because of where she is and what she is, and that's just not fair to her, right? Like, everyone has things that are, you know, aren't massive hits when they first come out, and maybe are respected later, or just don't work for people. You know, it's pedestals, people. Beware pedestals. In fact, Mari Okada is a good example of what we want to talk about with the Great Debate. And yes, I do plan to do a quick Otaku no Cooking tonight, probably in a little bit, because we're going to do these little sausage octopi, which should be fun. I don't know. But looks like a very simple little recipe. So yeah, it'll be kind of like what we've been doing before, you know, maybe 10 minutes just to get through all this stuff, to get through the recipe. Very, very simple. And I think next week might be sushi. I think we might be moving on to sushi next week. All right, so let's do the Great Debate. I will need to grab a few more few more swigs, no cigs, thank you, of throat juice. Are there sci-fi or futuristic books you'd recommend? Absolutely. Dune by Frank Herbert. The aforementioned Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. Be aware that both Dune and Starship Troopers have very specific perspectives on the world that the author is not necessarily suggesting is right. You know, their characters have very strong opinions. Even their protagonists have strong opinions, which the author does not necessarily agree with. So, for example, Starship Troopers has an extremely pro-military society, but the author is not saying that is the be-all, end-all of the world. It's just that that's what his characters live in, and that's what his characters support. So, you know, there's really no one in the book who is critiquing that, because there's no one in that society, there's no one in those characters' circle of people who are critiquing that. It's just not appropriate for that story. Thanks for stopping by, Kuma. Appreciate it. Have a good week. Mari Okada's male characters can be weird. Well, my male characters can be weird too. Other sci-fi books. I'm a big fan of Asimov. I would try his Foundation trilogy, particularly the first book, Foundation. And that is... The Foundation series is... let me switch back just so I don't get confused myself. The Foundation series, again, it is from the golden age of sci-fi. It is going in its own direction. And so it's kind of a weird book, but its themes are interesting. Let's see here. So I love Ray Bradbury's writing. I can read pretty much anything by Ray Bradbury. Some of the stuff in the last decade or two of his life got a little too weirdly poetic for my taste, but his writing is just always beautiful. He did some science fiction, but I would go for, you know, Ray Bradbury. If you see it, give it a try. No, the movie and the book are very different, tonally. The book is not a satire. That satire was invented for the movie. The book is much more, I would say, subtle, in the sense that they were like, no. His point was kind of, I'm not going to satirize it because no one in the book is satirizing it. No one in that society is satirizing it. So it's not appropriate for me to satirize. You know, this is what my characters believe, so I'm going to show you that belief and the impacts it has, and, you know, what it does to these people. You know, the Hollywood people basically thought that the average American couldn't think that deeply, so they had to throw it in your face. The movie does not. The book respects you more than the movie does. So just be aware of that. It's a much more subtle level of commentary on how that's on the results of that society. Let's see here. Other science fiction I recommend. What else do I have up here? I mean, certainly Ender's Game. Yeah, Ender's Game is one of the great classics. I have not seen the movie, so I can't comment. I've heard the movie is a... as Hollywood movie adaptations go, it's not wildly different from the book, but it's pretty different. But the book is fascinating and thought-provoking on multiple levels. Ender's Game. Other than that, I mean, lots and lots of things. I love Ringworld. I would only read the first Ringworld novel, but it was the inspiration for Halo. At least in terms of, the Halo ring is a ring world. That's where the ring world. What else? Gosh. I mean, there's lots of weird little stuff, like Forstchen's stuff. I read a lot of Michael Crichton. Werner Vinge. Werner Vinge's cool. Werner Vinge's Deepness in the Sky, A Fire Up in the Deep. Those are cool. Do I read Shakespeare? Not regularly, but I have read Shakespeare just for Shakespeare in the past. I think I have a Shakespeare collection. Yeah, I do. In fact, speaking of which, I not only have a collected works of Shakespeare, I also have, very conveniently, Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare. So, the Asimov guy, he wrote this big, long commentary to Shakespeare, which is very useful to kind of understand a lot of the references, a lot of the language has changed, which kind of explains a lot of that. What some of the words mean, what some of the quotes mean. So Animeva, I have a real problem with that. I have a real difficulty with the idea that we cannot support artists unless their political opinions merge with our own. Because to me, that is a form of fascism, frankly. It is basically saying, this person does not deserve to make a living. We are not allowed to... people should not spend money on this artist because of their political slant. I have a real problem with that. And no, I'm not calling you a fascist. I'm not saying, you suck. I'm saying that as a general rule for people scares me. Yeah, art should be separated from the artist. That is my view. Yes, there are very few people for whom politics is not part of their core belief system. So what? He is not a politician, right? He's not the one actually going out there and, making this. It is a personal, private opinion of his. And it is, in my opinion, it is not his audience's business to affect his ability to make money and to judge his art based on a personal opinion he holds. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a form of ad hominem. Now, it's different when, for example, John Norman, who wrote the... Animeva, what you are saying is equivalent on a fundamental level. By saying you cannot support that author, you are saying you refuse to give him the money that allows him to support himself and be an author, right? That is the stance you are taking. Is that if that person has a political opinion, I refuse to give him money, and that's how he makes his living, right? But now, so John Norman, for example, wrote a series of very misogynistic fantasy novels, and it came to light that like he agreed with the misogynistic stance of his characters, and would talk about how like this is how things should actually be, and would like promote that in real life, right? That is different. When somebody is actually making a difference towards something. So Anamiva, I'm not saying, we're not talking about other people. What I'm saying is that, what you have done is take money out of his pocket because you disagree with his political opinion. That's what I'm saying. And it's not that it does not enable you to do so. You choose it. Okay? You have chosen to influence your willingness to consume his art based on his personal belief system, right? Exactly, Game Escape. Right? No one's compelling you to buy Orson Scott Card stuff. I'm not saying you have to buy Orson Scott Card stuff. I'm saying I get worried when I hear people say, I don't buy this anymore because this person expressed something I don't agree with, and so I all the money I was going to give them is going away now. That is a form of popular censorship, artistic censorship. And again, I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying, how dare you. I'm saying, that is a general thing that worries me. That is a general attitude that I see often that, to me, is troublesome, right? So, I'm not trying to come down on you. Just talking about the general approach to things. Well, it is politics, though, spin to win. I mean, it is political. It's other things as well, right? But it's also politics. Well, right, but there's a difference. Tolerance is a very specific thing. Tolerance is a very specific, word, and refers to specific elements of things. I'm not familiar with Nobuhiro Atsuki. Who is Nobuhiro Atsuki? Are you talking about Nobuhiro Watsuki, the author of Kenshin? Watsuki, okay. Yeah, I mean, that will certainly always be in my mind, but it would not stop me from buying his next thing. Right? Also the fact that, like, he admitted to it. He's paying for his crime. And he's not, importantly, he's not saying this is awesome, right? He's not promulgating that. It was a thing he was involved in, and he appears to be sorry for it. Right? We move on. We make mistakes. We get involved in things, sometimes things that are very creepy. Does that mean that we can never be forgiven? That seems problematic to me. Okay. Sorry for getting into uncomfortable topics. Probably shouldn't have brought that up. Sorry, Enemy Eva, if I offended you. I did not mean to do that. Didn't mean to jump on you that way. Wasn't trying to. Well, Lenny's different because, again, her work was specifically in support of that. Lenny was part of that system. She was not just an outsider documenting it. She absolutely, went to the parties and, tried to seduce Hitler, basically, and all that stuff. I mean, there's. I'm glad you're still here, Enemy of I felt bad. But yeah, Lenny was complicit in a very strong way. So I think now to that point, I watched Olympia, which is Lenny Riefenstahl's documentation of the Olympics, the 38 Olympics, 36 Olympics. And it's an impressive technical achievement. And I can watch that and say that is impressive. Lenny Riefenstahl was an amazing director, and also acknowledge that she was, she absolutely promulgated the Nazi values, and she is guilty of that, right? So I think that's very different. She was part of that establishment, and the Nuremberg trials pretty clearly established that she wasn't just scared and going along with it because she had to. She embraced that pretty clearly. So I think that's different. Yeah, I still like Kenshin, despite the author's deeds. That's exactly how I see it, Matt. I mean, the other problem too is that every hero you have has done something that you would find morally problematic if you heard about it. We've all done something in our lives where if somebody else heard about it, especially from, a third party, said the right way, would probably, would horrify you. So, it depends on what we do. It depends on if it's something we said personally to somebody at some point, if it's a personal opinion we had or we said, that's very different, right, than Lenny Riefenstahl. So anyway. All right, so this works into the topic extremely well. That's kind of funny. So welcome to the Great Debate, where today we're talking about how real life crosses over with anime. Anime is often a very escapist medium. It's often about giant robots and science fiction and people being transported to fantasy worlds and all that kind of stuff, right? And so sometimes, though, anime feels very much like the real world. And it's not just when it's set in modern day, present time. It is when anime feels real. It feels grounded very strongly. And so we wanted to bring up some examples of that. In the chat room, I forget who it was who brought up a recent anime series called After the Rain, where it felt to that person like, because I haven't seen these particular scenes, like the sequences were really pulled from real life. That the author had really gone through these experiences. It's a romance series. So there's that. There are these things that really feel like they are real experiences. An example I would say is Summer Wars. I don't know if how much of Summer Wars is based on the author's real experiences. Obviously, they didn't, the exact things in Summer Wars didn't happen. But the actual sense of being around your family and all the chaos of a family reunion feels very real. It feels like it's pulled from things. And the director has said that was, he was kind of inspired by some of his own family get-togethers. And the rest of his works, Wolf Children, he said, was very much inspired by the experience of having young children running around in the house and what that was like, especially for him and his wife, and what it was like taking care of young children, right? And then you have, Welcome to the NHK. It's a great example of a series that is about somebody who is trying to escape into a fantasy world, but keeps getting pulled back into reality. And NHK is complicated because the character doesn't, the character, in a sense, wants to escape from real life, but he finds those fantasies too weird. And so in a sense, he's trying to hold on to real life and not escape into those particular fantasies. So it's an interesting commentary. And then again, Evangelion, all about not running away. Now again, Evangelion is set in this very non-realistic setting. This very futuristic, this very sci-fi setting, as it would be a good term, where it's not just, a different time. There are giant robots and lots of weirdness in that universe. But the main character is trying to very much face reality and face the situation he's in and not run away. So there's that. Then, of course, there's also, for example, there is anime that's literally based on actual historical events. So Grave of the Fireflies and Barefoot Gen, where, those are not exactly what happened, but there's that. And then, Liquidus, you're absolutely right. Shirobako it's not literally what happened to these characters, but it's based on the experiences of people working in the anime industry and the kinds of experiences you have. So it is, again, kind of very grounded in reality, while the characters are not, based on this person, based on that person necessarily. Although in Shirobako, actual voice actors show up in the series as characters in the anime series. Like, it is their name and their voice actor playing that character. So there's that. In this corner of the world. Cool. Yep, definitely. The Wind Rises is a little complicated as an example, because The Wind Rises basically merges both the main character's real life and a fictional short story. So a lot of that film did not happen at all, much less the dreams he has. But a lot of the story, like the whole thing with his wife, is completely made up. It's based on the short story. So The Wind Rises is an interesting thing where you kind of, in order to tell this character's story, Miyazaki felt a need to weave fiction into nonfiction. And Matt, you're absolutely right in the chat room that anime is very trope focused, and it has been trope focused for a very long time. Let's be honest. Anime of the 70s was very tropey, just different tropes. But it's certainly there's a bit more of that now than there was back in the 80s, for example, where you could do more original stuff. So there's not as much of a desire to focus on real life. The other interesting thing is the whole big boom in like the realistic sort of moe harem series of the 2000s, where you had, guys trying to buy half a dozen cute girls in high school, and it was very much modern day, but it was very escapist because the characters all fell into these very simple, personality buckets. The tsundere, the quiet girl with glasses, all that. And so it didn't feel, a lot of those shows don't really feel real. They don't feel real world grounded. It's just using the modern world as your escapist fantasy environment, if you will. And, really a lot of them were escaping back to the high school days, where all you had to do was go to classes and do your homework. We didn't have all the stresses of adult life, and you'd be surrounded by cute teenage girls, so why not, right? So what I think is really interesting about how anime takes that is the multiple different directions it goes in, where you have the shows that are that take the modern society, to take modern environments and basically make a fantasy out of it, or they cannot. A good example of that, I need to, one second. A Place Further Than the Universe, I think, is a great example from last season of a show that is about real life and is much more about the real world and trying to figure out who you are in a way that isn't as fantastical, isn't as it isn't trying to reassure the viewer that, oh, it'll all be okay. Now, it's a very positive series, but the idea is this is a struggle, this is hard, that changing your life, being a better person, is something that takes real struggle. Something you don't see in a lot of anime series, right? Mamoru Hosoda, yeah, totally. Yeah, he definitely has a summertime Japan thing. I mean, that is kind of a fetish in anime in general. You know, the cicadas in summer, all that is definitely a trope, but you're absolutely right that Hosoda does it much more than most. Yeah, I mean, summer in Japan is definitely a thing he harps on. And the other interesting thing, actually, about this is how anime will often layer in a serious subject into a show that's not serious, that is kind of escapist, where Taisho Yaku Musume, Taisho Baseball Girls, is a comedy set in 1920s Japan, but deals with arranged marriages as a very minor subplot. And it's dealt with very seriously. Like, it's not funny. There's this 13-year-old girl who has this arranged marriage to this guy. She's not married yet. And it's kind of like, this is a thing, right? This is a thing that exists, and she's probably going to get married to this guy, and what do you do? And that's kind of interesting to me. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Spin to Win, that Hosoda's films, like Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Summer Wars, even Our War Game, are very much about that idea of summer in Japan, of getting across that feeling of what it's like during summertime in high school. Obviously, I can't talk about what it's like being a high schooler in Japan, but there's that, again, I use that term grounded. It's very grounded in what that's like. Even Wolf Children, you know, some of the core moments in that happen during the summer. And I think it is really interesting that Hosoda uses the summertime in Japan to pull the viewer in and remind them what it was like being a teenager, right? And like you say, Fisher, that also tends to create a bit of a branding around Hosoda, where when you see a summertime scene with Hosoda, you think, I know where I am. I know what that feels like. My mom talks about this with church, where when she goes into an Episcopal church and they start going through the liturgy, she is suddenly, boom, focused. She is there. And she is, you know, that puts her in church mindset in a way that other, you know, approaches to church, especially more free-form church services, which are sometimes more entertainment-like, do not. And that's where I think that idea that Hosoda has kind of branded summer, if you will, into that. So Derp asked an interesting question in the chat room. Would you say anime being an animated medium helps serve escapism, or is a detriment to it? I think it more helps escapism than not, because the characters, you know, aren't real. You know, there is a level of separation between us and them. But it can definitely go both ways. One of the advantages of the animated medium is that it is more easy to identify yourself with an animated character because it is abstract, right? I do not look like Tom Cruise. So I'm never going to identify with Tom Cruise as closely as I can with, you know, a character from Naruto or Attack on Titan or things like that, because those character designs are just more abstract. So that is, again, you're right, Animiva, you're welcome to NHK, has escapism as a theme, but stays very much in the real world. And it's interesting because NHK values the real world. It is very much a series about how important it is to stay in the real world, despite the fact that the main character is kind of being pulled away by his neuroses, if you will, or his mental problems. And so you get to see kind of that balancing act between what's going on to all that. Yeah, no, you absolutely get anime that that are absolutely ahead of their time. You talk about virtual idols. I think Omega Zone 23 may have suggested it. I think Macross Plus with giant holographic virtual idols is a direct precursor to the amazing hologram concerts that Hatsune Miku does in Japan and all that stuff. And you have these anime that absolutely bring this up. Ghost in the Shell, Information Warfare, absolutely. We are increasingly living in the Ghost in the Shell world in this fascinating way, and Ghost in the Shell has done a great job of updating itself for the times, where the Ghost in the Shell TV series was not the exact same tech and universe as the movie, which is not the exact same as the manga, right? They knew how to evolve things. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Spin. NHK understands depression, understands one of the great things about NHK is within a few episodes, you absolutely empathize with a character who wants to escape from reality and who is in this very weird place. And how, very few of us will ever be in that position of being a complete shut-in. And by I don't just mean rarely going outside. I mean somebody who is physically afraid of going outside. Very few of us will actually be in that position, but you absolutely get it very quickly. Not the least because of that song that plays constantly in the background, which is so hilarious. For those not familiar, in Welcome to the NHK, the main character has become sort of socially isolated, and so he stays in his apartment all the time, and his next door neighbor is playing this one anime song on repeat 24 hours a day. So like for the entire episode, no matter where you are, sometimes you can't entirely hear it. It's like 2 rooms away, sometimes a little closer, but it's always somewhere there in the background. It just drives you mad. It's brilliant little storytelling. And it's the most insipid, standard, like somebody just cranked this out anime song. So it's very funny, but it is one of those things that does drive you into that character's mind. And that's a great point, actually, is that one of the interesting things about anime is how well it helps you empathize with those characters. One of the ways that I think live action in the West and other mediums don't do a really good job with that. I don't feel like I'm Captain Kirk. I don't feel like I'm Picard. I don't feel like I'm, name a character from Leverage or whatever. I don't identify necessarily with those characters and how they see things. Instead, I'm expected to see what they do and maybe agree or disagree. Whereas in anime, they do a really good job of understanding a character's emotional state and why they are who they are. And it's one of the reasons why I think anime can feel so real. Because we're not just seeing other characters and their opinions, we understand what it's like to be those people. Oh, you're absolutely right, Derp. Some people identify more with live action. It really depends on the person. It's just, that abstract has been shown to have an effect on some people. Right? So that is a thing. And that gets to this whole idea of adapting actual real live action stuff to anime. Stuff like Barefoot Gen, which is semi-autobiographical, same way with the Fireflies. I think one of the reasons it works so well in the animation medium is because it is abstract, because we can keep a bit of a distance from it, while also in our own ways we can identify more closely with the characters sometimes. When you're watching an actual real live action person going through it, especially have kids, imagine watching Grave of the Fireflies live action, right? Actually seeing children go through that would be kind of hard to watch. I remember watching War of the Worlds, the more recent Steven Spielberg adaptation, not recent anymore, and seeing it's Dakota Fanning, I think, is the little girl in there. I felt uncomfortable at times at how horribly horrified and traumatized that character looked and seemed to feel during that movie. I didn't really want to put myself in her shoes, but it's easier for me when watching animation to imagine that character's actual emotional state, to feel like his emotional state. Because of how good our brains are at recognizing faces, when we see a real face, we can in a sense, because it's that weird irony, because we recognize the face so closely. When it's a real little girl, a real child, we tend to bounce back from it because we don't want to, identify that closely. It'll emotionally shatter us. But when we see an animated character, it's easier for us to pull forward, which can then cause a greater emotional attachment. The mind is weird. That is the thing. And Underdog, mystery anime. Mystery is a very strong part, a very common theme in anime. And I think you're right that the mystery tends to somehow feel more mysterious. It feels more immediate. It feels more like something that actually affects the characters, I think, than it does over here. Partly because the mystery in anime is usually a background plot element. It's something that is affecting the characters, but it's not, in mystery anime series, the main characters are rarely full-time detectives, right? They're generally pulled into a mysterious environment. And that can help us feel more realistic, because when you're watching, or you're reading Sherlock Holmes, I don't feel like I'm Sherlock Holmes, right? I don't feel like I'm Hercule Poirot. But I can identify with these, random people who are suddenly pulled into a mystery. I think that's a very smart way for anime to do that. So, okay. I think we've covered this topic pretty well. So thank you all very much for that. I think we'll stop that right there. And really appreciate your thoughts, especially those in the chat room. I hope you guys can join us every Friday night for the live stream when we actually talk about this in the chat room. And we'll be talking about more of this in later weeks. So again, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Spin. I do not have a link to that study or those things with me. I read it in some book somewhere, and I'll try to dig it out at some point. One of the things I want to do as I'm minimizing is go back through all my anime books, like the nonfiction about anime. And I probably won't get rid of many of them, or even any of them necessarily, but I need to actually find references. I need to find where I read that stuff and say, oh, this is in this book. This is in that over there. It's just, now it's something I read 15 years ago, in some book somewhere. So at some point I'll have references if I ever find the time to go back and dig through all that stuff. But it's a pretty well-recognized element of animation. I'm sure if you dig up, Disney's talked about this too. In some cases, like Walt Disney talked about this on like Wonderful World of Disney, about how people identify with animated characters versus real-life actors. So, yes, yeah. Apologies, but that is not on my mind. All right, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to push off Otaku no Cooking until next week, because we are very late and I'm very tired, and I'm going to fall over if I go into the kitchen. Yeah, I can feel right now that I'm starting to get very loopy. So, next week I am going to be at a convention, PAX East, the mostly video game convention in Boston. If you're there, I hope we can catch up. Stop by the Discord or whatever, email me, let me know. I will be at a panel, Tabletop System Wars, at 3:30 p.m. on Sunday. Terrible time slot, but that's what they gave us. I will try to live stream, do another standard live stream show from the hotel next Friday, as usual. But, hotel Wi-Fi is weird. Sometimes folks are like, hey, let's go here and do this thing. And I end up, I didn't realize it took me this long to get back to the hotel. So I will try to do that. This is pure vodka. Tips on micromanaging your life. Yeah, that's tough. And I do not mind that question at all. Micromanaging your life. I micromanaged my life for a while, and I found that broke down after a while. I don't micromanage my life anymore. But what I do is in my kitchen, I have a sheet of paper. And on that sheet of paper, I list all of my projects. Projects are multi-step things I am trying to accomplish over the next, say, 2 months, roughly. And it can be things like watch Gunbuster, right? Finish this anime series, which would obviously be a little shorter term, but it's everything over the next 2 months. It might be building something. It might be something. Next to that, I have a bunch of index cards on magnets. And some of those index cards are colored, and those are things that I try to do every day. So stuff like exercise, practice speaking, because as you all know, I can stumble over my words a lot and speak very quickly. Other things like that. Also, with that, are other index cards which contain the next action in each of those projects. So what I have to do next in each of those. So maybe just, finding the email so I can, where this order came from, so I can actually email the person and respond. I just did the very next action. And sometimes I'll have, the next thing I need to do on something is the only thing I have to do on something, so I don't actually make a project out of it. I just say, I just need to, vacuum this. I can put that on the list. So I know everything I'm doing over the next few months, and then what I need to do next on those. And when I come home from work, I look at those, and I start deciding what to do next. And I just go from one to the other, and I say, okay, time to do this, time to do that. And that allows me to be more reactive to things, in the sense that I can slot things in depending on how much time I have in the moment, instead of saying, okay, tomorrow night, I think I have 3 hours, and so I'll try to fill up those 3 hours. Instead, that night I go and say, okay, here's how much time I actually have. So it's a little bit more sort of time management judo, if you will. But I'll have to talk about that more next week or the week after if, the stream doesn't doesn't happen next week. But yeah, thank you all very much for joining me. As always, I really appreciate you being here. This is great. This is why I do this, you guys being here and us being able to chat. So thank you all very much. I will see you hopefully next week. More videos coming out. Kit Bash is tomorrow night, hopefully, assuming I'm not falling asleep as well. Thank you all. See ya.